When my grandmother died, she left behind a house full of things people could put a price on. A car. A few pieces of jewelry. An antique grandfather clock. A small house outside Columbus, Ohio. And then there was the one thing she left to me. A battered red recipe book held together with tape. My older brother Michael got Grandma's Buick. My Aunt Susan received her jewelry. My cousin Jennifer got the grandfather clock Grandma had promised her years earlier. And me? I got a book stained with flour, butter, coffee, and 50 years of fingerprints. First, I didn't know what to think. Then Aunt Susan smiled and said, "Well, Emily, at least you'll always know how to make Mom's apple pie." Everyone laughed. So did I. But there was something they didn't know. 3 months before Grandma died, she had pointed to that exact book and told me, "Someday I want you to have it." When I asked why, she gave me an answer I didn't understand. "Because you'll read the parts that aren't recipes." 3 weeks after her funeral, I finally opened the book. On page 47 I found a note about me. Then I found one about my brother. Then my mother. Then Grandpa. By the time I reached the back cover, I was crying so hard I could barely see Grandma's handwriting. Because Grandma hadn't left me a collection of recipes. She had left me 50 years of our family's history. And hidden between those stained pages was an inheritance none of us knew existed. Not money. Something much harder to replace. My grandmother's name was Margaret Wilson. Everyone called her Maggie. For 53 years, she lived in the same little white house outside Columbus. It wasn't impressive. 2 bedrooms. 1 bathroom. A narrow living room with an old brick fireplace. But the kitchen? That kitchen was the center of our family. Every Thanksgiving we squeezed around Grandma's table. Every Christmas morning, the house smelled like cinnamon rolls. Every birthday meant a homemade cake. If somebody graduated, Grandma cooked. If somebody got married, Grandma cooked. If somebody lost a job, got divorced, got sick, or simply had a terrible week, Grandma cooked. As a child, I thought that's just what grandmothers did. It took me years to understand that food was Grandma's language. She wasn't a woman who gave long speeches about love. She rarely said anything sentimental. Instead, she remembered that Michael hated onions. She remembered that Aunt Susan liked the crispy corner pieces of baked macaroni and cheese. She remembered that Grandpa wanted extra black pepper in his gravy. And she remembered that I loved strawberry shortcake. Whenever I walked through her door, Grandma asked the same question. "Emily, honey, are you hungry?" It didn't matter if I'd eaten 10 minutes earlier. The correct answer was always yes. Then she'd smile. "Good. Sit down." Some of my happiest childhood memories happened at that kitchen table. I'd do homework while Grandma rolled pie dough. Sometimes she'd let me help. I was terrible at it. My pie crusts looked like maps of countries that didn't exist. Grandma never criticized them. She'd laugh and say, "Doesn't have to look perfect to taste like home." At the time it was just something Grandma said. Years later those words would come back to me. Grandma was 82 during our final Thanksgiving together. She had gotten thinner that year. She moved more slowly. And for the first time I could remember, she needed help lifting the turkey from the oven. Nobody said anything. Maybe we were all thinking the same thing. We just weren't ready to say it out loud. 21 people crowded into her little house that Thanksgiving. Children ran through the hallway. Football played on television. Someone spilled cranberry sauce on Grandma's tablecloth. Uncle David argued with Michael over the Lions game. It was loud, messy, normal. Grandma loved every second. After dinner, I found her alone in the kitchen washing dishes. "Grandma, stop." She looked at me. "What?" "There are 20 people in the next room. Somebody else can do this." She smiled. "I know." I took the dish towel from her. "Then sit down." For once she listened. She sat at the kitchen table while I cleaned. For a while neither of us spoke. Then Grandma looked toward the doorway. From the living room came laughter, children shouting, and somebody complaining about the football score. Grandma smiled. "You know what I'll miss someday?" I turned around. "What?" "This. The dirty dishes." She laughed. "No." Then her expression softened. "Knowing everybody is in the next room." Something about the way she said it made me stop. "Grandma." She waved her hand. "Don't make that face. I'm 82, not 22. Then she pointed toward the cabinet beside the refrigerator. There's something in there I want you to have someday. What? My recipe book. The old red one? The old red one. I'd seen it hundreds of times. It was practically falling apart. Why me? Grandma looked at me for several seconds. Then she said, because you'll read the parts that aren't recipes. I laughed. What does that even mean? She smiled. You'll understand. 3 months later, Grandma died peacefully in her sleep. 2 weeks after the funeral, our family gathered at Grandma's house to go through the personal items mentioned in her will. Grandma wasn't wealthy, but she and Grandpa had always been careful. The house would eventually be sold, with the proceeds divided among their 3 children. Aunt Susan received Grandma's jewelry. Uncle David received Grandpa's watch and old tool collection. My mother was given several pieces of furniture and Grandma's china. The grandchildren received smaller personal things. Michael got Grandma's old Buick. Jennifer received the grandfather clock Grandma had promised her years ago. Then the attorney handed me the old red recipe book Grandma had specifically named for me. Michael looked over. That's it. I held it against my chest. That's it. He grinned. You got robbed. Michael. I'm kidding. Everyone laughed. But if I'm being completely truthful, part of me was disappointed. Not because I wanted money. I didn't. I just wondered why Grandma had made such a point of leaving me something I could have copied at any time. Then I remembered what she'd said. Because you'll read the parts that aren't recipes. That night I took the book home. I set it on my kitchen counter. And for almost 3 weeks, I didn't open it. Maybe part of me knew that once I did, Grandma's death would feel real. One Sunday afternoon, I decided to make Grandma's chicken and dumplings. It had been my favorite meal whenever I was sick as a child. I finally opened the book. The first few pages were exactly what I expected. Potruast. Cornbread. Biscuits. Meatloaf. Apple pie. But Grandma had written notes everywhere. David likes extra garlic. Susan says she hates mushrooms. Chop them small. She never notices. I laughed. Then I saw my own name. Emily, extra cinnamon. I kept turning pages. Then I reached page 47. Chicken and dumplings. At the bottom, written lightly in pencil, was a sentence. February 12, 1998. Emily has the flu. She asked if this soup has medicine in it. I told her yes. The medicine is Grandma. I stopped breathing for a second. I remembered that day. I had been 9. My parents were working, so Grandma picked me up from school. She wrapped me in a blanket on the couch and made chicken and dumplings. I remembered asking why Grandma's food always made me feel better. I'd forgotten her answer. Grandma hadn't. I turned the page. October 6, 2001. Michael didn't make the baseball team. Pretended he wasn't upset. Ate 3 pieces of chocolate cake. Another page. May 19, 2004. Susan signed the divorce papers today. Made her favorite lasagna. She cried at the table when she thought I wasn't looking. I stared at the book. These weren't cooking notes. They were memories. Our memories. So I went back to the first page. And started reading. The earliest entries dated back to 1968. Grandma had been 27. Grandpa had just lost his factory job. Beside a recipe for potato soup, Grandma had written, cheap dinner. For potatoes can feed 5 people if you add enough water and love. Underneath was another sentence. Kids don't know we're almost out of money. Keep it that way. I stared at those words. I never heard that story. I called my mother. Mom, did Grandpa lose his job in 1968? There was a pause. How do you know that? Grandma wrote about it. Mom became quiet. Yes. He was out of work for almost 8 months. Were things bad? Very. She hesitated. I didn't know how bad until I was older. Your grandmother sometimes told us she'd already eaten. I looked at the recipe. Suddenly, potato soup wasn't just potato soup. It was 4 potatoes stretched across 5 plates. It was a mother pretending she wasn't hungry. I kept reading. Beside a birthday cake recipe. David turns 10 tomorrow. Couldn't afford the bicycle he wanted. Found a used one through church. George fixed it after the kids went to sleep. Looks almost new. Beside homemade bread. Snowstorm. Roads closed. Kids think baking bread is an adventure. Good. Let them. Then months later beside beef stew. George's first paycheck after 8 months. He brought me flowers. Told him he shouldn't waste money. Secretly glad he did. I laughed through my tears. Grandma had preserved an entire family history in the margins of recipes. But the hardest page was still waiting for me. Grandpa George died when I was 16. He and Grandma had been married for 47 years. I remembered his funeral. I remembered Grandma standing beside his casket, greeting every person who came through the line. She thanked them. She hugged them. She asked if they'd eaten. I never saw her cry. For years, I thought that meant Grandma was stronger than everyone else. Then I found a page titled, George's Sunday Roast. The date was March 14, 2005. Grandma had written, George barely ate tonight. Said everything tasted wonderful anyway. Asked me to sit beside him instead of cleaning the kitchen. Below it was one more line. March 15th. George is gone. I turned the page. It was blank. Then the next page. Also blank. Finally, several pages later, I found one sentence. I don't know how to cook for one. I covered my mouth. That sentence broke me. For the first time, I pictured Grandma alone in that kitchen after Grandpa died. No football playing in the living room. No voice asking when dinner would be ready. No second coffee cup waiting beside hers in the morning. Then, several pages later, Grandma had written, Made pancakes for Emily and Michael today. House felt alive again. I cried. Because suddenly I understood something I'd never understood as a child. We always thought Grandma fed us because we needed her. Grandma fed us because she needed us. And that was when I knew I couldn't keep this book to myself. I called my mother first. Then Michael. Then Aunt Susan and Uncle David. You need to come over. Michael asked why. Because of Grandma's recipe book. There was a pause. Seriously. Just come. That Saturday, 8 members of our family gathered around my kitchen table. I put the book in the middle. Michael looked at it. So what's the big mystery? I opened it. And I started reading. First people laughed. Then they stopped. I read the note about Uncle David's bicycle. He stared at me. I remember that bike. You knew it was used? He shook his head. No. I thought it was brand new. Mom smiled. Dad must have done a pretty good job. David looked down at the table. He always did. Then I read Aunt Susan's entry. The one about her divorce. Her expression changed immediately. She knew I cried? Apparently. Susan wiped beneath one eye. I thought I hid that from her. Mom smiled sadly. You couldn't hide anything from Mom. For the next few hours, every recipe opened another door. Birthdays. Graduations. Illnesses. Christmas mornings. Arguments nobody remembered anymore. Small acts of kindness nobody had noticed at the time. Grandma had recorded the moments families usually lose. Then Jennifer turned a page near the back. What's this? There was a heading written in Grandma's handwriting. Recipes they must learn before I'm gone. Underneath were our names. Every one of us. Beside Michael's name. Pancakes. He always burns the first one. Tell him that's normal. Michael laughed. Still true. Beside Susan. Piekrast. She gives up too quickly when it tears. Susan shook her head. Also true. Then we found my mother's name. Christmas cinnamon rolls. She knows the recipe but still calls me every December. Mom started crying. Every Christmas Eve for as long as I could remember, Mom called Grandma. How much milk? How long do I need it? Does this look right? But Mom already knew how to make the cinnamon rolls. The phone call had never really been about the recipe. Then Michael pointed lower on the page. There's yours. Beside my name, Grandma had written only one word. Everything. Stared at it. Underneath she'd added, Emily thinks recipes are instructions. Someday she'll understand their stories. Nobody said anything. Then Jennifer noticed something attached to the inside of the back cover. An envelope. On the front, Grandma had written, For Emily, after everyone has read the book. My hands began to shake. I opened it. Inside was a letter. My sweet Emily, if you're reading this, I suppose you finally listened to me. That only took 30-something years. I hope everyone is sitting around a table. If they're not, call them and make them come over. Feed them if necessary. Food is excellent bait. You probably wonder why I gave you this old book. It isn't because you're the best cook in the family. You're not. Your mother is. Please don't argue with me. I'm dead, so I automatically win. I gave it to you because you pay attention to stories. And every family needs someone who remembers. Money disappears. Houses get sold. Jewelry gets lost. Furniture breaks. Even photographs fade. But stories survive if someone keeps telling them. Every stain in this book came from a meal somebody shared. Every torn page was turned by hands that were busy feeding people. Every note reminds me of someone I loved. Including you. Especially you. When your grandfather and I were young, we thought success meant owning a bigger house. Later, we thought it meant having enough money to send our children to college. Eventually, I learned something better. A successful life is one where people still want to gather around your table after all those years. If you want to honor me, don't put this book behind glass. Use it. Spill something on it. Add your own notes. Teach the children. Invite people who are lonely. Cook too much food. Send leftovers home with everyone. And when somebody asks for a recipe, give it to them. Love isn't supposed to be a secret ingredient. One more thing. Look inside the back cover. Love, Grandma. For several seconds nobody moved. Then I looked inside the back cover. Tucked beneath the lining was one final piece of paper. For one ridiculous second, I wondered whether Grandma had hidden money there. She hadn't. It was a recipe. The top she'd written. Sunday dinner. There were no ingredients in the usual sense. Instead it said, 1 table. As many chairs as necessary. Family, friends, neighbors, strangers. Enough food that nobody worries about taking the last piece. 1 story from everyone. No phones if possible. Stay longer than planned. At the bottom. Serve often. Michael laughed through his tears. That's not a recipe. Mom looked at him. Yes, it is. And for the first time since Grandma died, the room filled with laughter that didn't feel guilty. Grandma's house was eventually sold. Her Buick stopped running months later. The grandfather clock turned out to be worth much less than everyone expected. Life moved on. But Grandma's recipe didn't. Our family started having Sunday dinner again. Not every Sunday. Real families don't work that way. People had jobs. Kids had soccer games. Somebody was always late. But once or twice a month we gathered. Usually at my house. At first, I tried to make Grandma's food exactly the way she had. My biscuits came out too hard. My gravy had lumps. One Sunday, I burned the bottom of her apple pie. I stood there staring at it, close to tears. Then Mom opened Grandma's recipe book and pointed to a sentence written decades earlier. Doesn't have to look perfect to taste like home. So we ate the burned pie. Michael had 2 pieces. Over time, new handwriting appeared in Grandma's book. Michael wrote, "Double the bacon. Trust me." Aunt Susan added her lemon pie recipe. My daughter Lily wrote beside the pancake recipe. Mom burned the first one. Grandma Maggie was right. One afternoon, Jennifer's little boy drew what was probably supposed to be a chicken beside the soup recipe. My first instinct was to erase it. Then I remembered Grandma's letter. Use it. So I left the drawing exactly where it was. The pages became more stained. The binding became weaker. And somehow the book became more valuable. Not less. About a year later, my 11-year-old daughter Lily and I were making Grandma's cinnamon rolls. She pointed at the old red book. "Mom." "Yeah. How much is that worth?" I laughed. "What do you mean? It's really old." "It's not that old." She ignored me. "Grandma Maggie wrote in it, right?" She did. "So is it valuable?" I looked down at the book. To an antique dealer, it probably wasn't worth much at all. The cover was damaged. The pages were stained. A child had drawn a chicken in it. But inside that book was Grandpa fixing a used bicycle after the kids went to sleep. Grandma stretching 4 potatoes across 5 plates. My mother calling every Christmas Eve even though she already knew the recipe. My aunt surviving a divorce. My brother recovering from disappointment. My childhood fever. Grandpa's last dinner. Grandma learning how to live alone. How could anyone put a price on that? "It's worth more than anything else I own," I said. Lily's eyes widened. "Like $1 million? More." She looked skeptical. Then she asked the question I didn't know I'd been waiting to hear. Can I have it someday? I looked at Grandma's handwriting, and suddenly I understood exactly why she'd chosen me. Yes. Lily smiled. But there's a condition. She groaned. What? You have to use it. Okay. And you have to remember the stories. She became quiet. Then she nodded. I will. One Sunday evening after dinner, I stood alone in the kitchen. Dirty plates covered the table. There were crumbs on the floor. Someone had left a glass in the living room. The kitchen was a disaster. I reached for a dish towel. Then I heard laughter from the next room. My daughter was laughing with her cousin. Michael was arguing with my husband about football. Mom had fallen asleep in the armchair. Somebody was cutting another piece of pie even though everyone had said they were full. And suddenly I remembered our last Thanksgiving with Grandma. You know what I'll miss someday? This. The dirty dishes? No. Knowing everybody is in the next room. I put the dish towel down. For a moment, I could almost picture Grandma standing beside me. Not Grandma at 82. Grandma from my childhood. Apron around her waist. Flour on her hands. That familiar smile on her face. I imagined her listening to the noise in the next room. She would have loved it. I opened her recipe book to the final blank page. Then I picked up a pen. I wrote, Sunday dinner. 23 people. Not enough chairs. Michael brought folding ones from the garage. Lily made cinnamon rolls. One batch burned. Everyone ate them anyway. I stopped, then added one more line. Grandma would have loved tonight. Someday Lily will inherit this book. Maybe her children will add their own recipes. Maybe one of my grandchildren will someday turn these pages and ask who Margaret and George were. And someone will tell them, these were the people who sat at this table before you. These were the people who loved you before they even knew your name. That's what Grandma understood long before I did. An inheritance isn't always something you can deposit in a bank. Sometimes it's a recipe written in fading ink. A stain from a Thanksgiving 40 years ago. A note beside a birthday cake. A story someone cared enough to remember. Money can disappear. Houses can be sold. Cars rust. Jewelry gets lost. But when a family keeps gathering around the same table, when children learn the stories of people they never had the chance to meet, when one generation teaches the next how love was served, something survives. Grandma didn't leave me the most expensive thing she owned. She left me something better. She left me proof that our family had been loved for generations. And she trusted me to make sure the next generation knew it. Grandma's recipe book was worth more than any fortune. Not because of what was hidden inside it, but because of everyone who was still there. Between the pages,